everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Madeline and I create crafting content here on YouTube. In today's video, I'm going to be taking you through all the steps you need to know to be able to knit your own cotton rounds. So I've seen quite a few of these tutorials for crochet, but I haven't seen one yet for knitting. So what I decided to do is to put together a little tutorial and a pattern to show you how to knit your own. So down in the description box below, you're going to find each of the video breakpoints. That way, if you want to fast forward or rewind to any specific part of this video, you can find that down below. You're also going to find the full written version of the pattern. And this pattern is going to be available in two sizes, or two weights of yarn really. The one I'm going to be showing you in the video is the worsted weight version. Then there's also a fingering weight version. So how we're going to work through these is we're going to start at the outer edge. We're going to cast on all the stitches, and then we're going to join in the round. The method I use to knit in the round is magic loop, so that'll be what I'll be taking you through today. Then we're slowly going to decrease into the center, and then lastly cast off those stitches. And basically the only difference between the worsted weight and the fingering weight is the number of stitches you cast on and the number of decreases you have to do to work into the center. Other than that, they're exactly the same. Now what I'm showing you here, the cute little stacked up version of these, I think they just look really cute when you pair them up in a set. So here I have 8 of them, and then I just tie them together with a little yarn bow. This way, if you want to give it as a gift or something like that, it looks really cute. I just put my knitting name on the front, so KnittingHouseSquare, and then on the back I give instructions on what the fiber content is and how to wash them. And if you are washing these, even if your yarn is machine dryable, I would recommend laying them flat to dry, just so then they don't start to curl up on themselves. So lay flat to dry would be my recommendation. So let's get started with how to actually knit these. Starting out with the materials we need for this project. So first up, I just have a pair of scissors. Next, I have a tapestry needle. And in today's video, I'm going to be knitting the worsted weight version of this pattern. So here, this is the Loops and Threads Capri yarn. Unfortunately, I only have a little bit left because I have knit quite a few of these, but I'll put a picture up on the screen of what this yarn looks like. It's from Michaels. Then I have my knitting needle, and we're going to be knitting using magic loop. So I have around a 32-inch cord here. And I would recommend using, for your knitting needle size, around a US 8. If you do tend to be a looser knitter, you could go down to a US 7 if you want. And then this is what the little finished products look like. So here I have the stack of 8. This is again this same yarn here. So this is Capri by Loops and Threads. And then for the fingering weight version, I use the organic, I can't remember, but it's by Lion brand. I'll link it down below. So they are almost exactly the exact same size too. So now let's get started. To start out, I'm going to cast on a total of 36 stitches. And for magic loop, the way it works is you're just going to want to take either one of your knitting needle points and you're going to cast on all 36 stitches just in a row. So just as if you were knitting flat, all 36 stitches right in a row. And for this project, you can really use any cast on method you'd like. I'm probably going to use the long tail cast on method because that's one of my preferred methods. If you aren't familiar with how to cast on, I'll leave a video linked up here in the corner. That way you can check out some cast on methods if you're new to knitting. So here are my 36 stitches, and I'm just going to double check one time here that I have the right number. So now what I want to do is I want to join in the round. So how I'm going to do this is I'm going to grab onto all my stitches here and I'm going to slide them all over onto the cord. Now what I want to do is I want to count in from either side to the halfway point. Okay, so I found my halfway point, and now at that point I'm going to stretch out my stitches so I can see the cord there, and then I'm going to grab onto the cord. Now I want to fold my knitting needles in half, and now I'm gently going to pull on my stitches and pull the cord so that each half of the stitches ends up on one of the knitting needles. Now there's a couple things we need to do to get set up for magic loop. The first thing is you want your knitting needle points pointed over towards the right. So I'm going to point my knitting needle points over there. Next step is you want your working yarn coming out the back knitting needle. So when I hold my 2 knitting needles for magic loop, I hold them so that one's closer to me, which I call the front knitting needle, and then one's further away from me, which I call the back knitting needle. And they're kind of like on a flat plane that's parallel to the table. So these 2 knitting needles are being held at the same level. So again, I want the one with the working yarn coming out my back knitting needle. So I'm gonna flip these over so that the actual ball of yarn is attached to my further away knitting needle. And now I wanna twist these stitches so that these cast on bumps are down towards the table. So I'm just gonna move these around so that all those cast on bumps are going down, and you do wanna make sure it isn't twisted at all in that inner corner. Okay, so this looks good. I'm just gonna untangle my working yarn here real quick. So now when I actually knit magic loop, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this back knitting needle, or the one furthest away from me, and I'm gonna pull it towards the right. But there is one thing we have to keep in mind first, and that is our first stitch on our round gonna be a knit stitch or a purl stitch? So there aren't actually any purl stitches in this pattern, which makes it a little bit easier. So because everything is a knit stitch, what I wanna do is I wanna bring my working yarn up in between my 2 knitting needles and then drape it over that back knitting needle. That'll set it up so that I don't end up with any extra yarn overs at the beginning of a round. The next thing to keep in mind is that to knit one round using magic loop, we have to knit all the way across this front knitting needle, turn our work, and knit all the way across the back knitting needle. That is one full round. If we only worked across half the stitches, that would only be half a round. So first we're gonna knit our full round. And in the instructions, it says after we cast on and join in the round, which we just did, we're gonna knit one full round. So to start off knitting, I'm gonna take my back knitting needle point, which is the one with the working yarn on it. I'm gonna pull it towards the right. Now when I pull it towards the right, I'm still gonna have plenty of cord over here on the left-hand side. And now basically those back stitches are just on the cord, and I can knit with this knitting needle. So what I wanna do is I'm just gonna put it into my first stitch on my front knitting needle as if to knit, wrap my yarn around, and pull through. So I just knit that first stitch. Now I'm gonna go all the way across this front knitting needle, knitting each one of these stitches. So now I'm gonna knit all the way to the end here. And once I finish, I'm just gonna drop my free knitting needle that doesn't have any stitches on it. Now what I wanna do is, again, I wanna turn it so my knitting needle points are going over towards the right. And I'm gonna thread back in the second knitting needle point here. So again, I should have half the stitches on one, half the stitches on the other. And again, when I end up over here, I want my work coming out down towards the table. So if you have to twist it at all, just twist it all back down towards the table. I want to make sure my working yarn is coming out the back knitting needle, or the one furthest away from me. And now what I want to do is I just worked across the first half of the stitches, so I'm going to work across the second half now. So again, just to recap how I have my knitting needle set up, I have my knitting needle points going over towards the right. My working yarn is coming out this back knitting needle, and my work is coming out down towards the table. Now I'm going to take the back knitting needle point, I'm going to pull it towards the right, and I'm going to go into the first stitch on this half of the work, and I'm going to knit all the way across. And again, if you didn't verify yet, before you work into that first one, you want to make sure your working yarn is coming up in between your 2 knitting needles, and then it's just draped over that back knitting needle. That'll again help to prevent any yarn overs at the beginning of the round. So now I'm going to knit all the way across this side. Now that I've finished that side, again, I'm going to drop my free knitting needle and turn my work, thread back in my second knitting needle, and make sure I'm all set up again the same exact way. So knitting needle points over towards the right, working yarn coming out my knitting needle that's further away from me, I have my working yarn coming up in between the two knitting needles, draped over that back knitting needle, and my work is coming out down towards the table. So because we just went through each half of the stitches, so we knit across this front, turned our work, and knit across that back, that was one full round. And the way I tell that I'm back at the beginning of the round is I look at where my tail is. So when my tail is over here on the right-hand side, I'm about to work a new round. If my tail is over on the left-hand side, I'm only halfway through my stitches. So that's how I keep track. And now this next round has a repeat in it. So what it's having us do is it's working a slip, slip, knit, then we're knitting 2 stitches, and then we work a knit 2 together. And we repeat that a total of 6 times all the way across the round. So we're going to repeat that on the front knitting needle, turn our work, and repeat it on the back knitting needle. So first, to work it on the front knitting needle, I'm going to pull my back knitting needle towards the right. Now first I need to work a slip, slip, knit. So I'm going to slip the first stitch as if to knit from my left to right knitting needle. I'm going to slip my second stitch as if to knit from my left to right knitting needle. Now I just want to pass both of those stitches back over to my left knitting needle. So all I've done is twist each one of those. And now I'm going to take my right knitting needle point into the back of both of those stitches at the same time, wrap my yarn around, and pull through. So what a slip slip knit is it twists each one of the stitches and then we knit it through the back of the loop. So essentially it just forms a left leaning decrease. Now I need to knit 2 stitches, knit 1, knit 2, and now I need to work a knit 2 together. So a knit 2 together, I'm going to take my right knitting needle point, go into the next 2 stitches, starting over here at the left, going into the base of both of them over towards the right, wrap my yarn around, and pull through. So a knit 2 together is a right leaning decrease. So now we just turn those 6 stitches down into 4. So now I'm going to repeat that exact same thing again. I'm going to work a slip, slip, pass them both back over to the left knitting needle, knit them together through the back loop, knit 2 stitches. Now work a knit 2 together. So go into the base of the next 2 stitches, from left to right, knit them together. And I'm going to continue this repeat all the way across this front knitting needle and then all the way across the back knitting needle. So now I'm ready to begin a new round because again I can tell that I've already worked that repeat across the front, turned my work, and worked that repeat across the back. And my tail is back over here on the right hand side of my work. So I'm back at the beginning of the round. And this next round just says to knit 1 full round. So I'm going to knit all the way across the front knitting needle, turn my work, and knit all the way across the back knitting needle. So next up again, I have another decrease round. So for this decrease round, I'm going to work a slip, slip, knit, and then a knit 2 together. And I'm going to repeat that 4-stitch repeat over and over again all the way across the round. So first, for the first 2 stitches, I'm going to slip, slip, pass them both back over to the left knitting needle, knit them together through the back loop. So we just turn those 2 stitches down into 1, work a knit 2 together. And repeat that repeat all the way across this round. Slip, slip, knit. Now after working that full decrease round, again, I'm going to work 1 full knit round. Now the last round I'm going to knit, I'm just going to work a slip, slip, knit on each set of 2 stitches all the way across the round. Now at this very last bit, I still like to thread in both my knitting needle points because I find it's easier to use the tapestry needle then. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut my yarn leaving about an 8-inch tail. And you can see there's still quite a bit of yarn left. They really don't take much yarn at all. Now I'm going to thread my tapestry needle with this tail we just cut. And now I'm going to thread this through the remaining stitches. So you can see this first stitch on the back knitting needle is the one it's coming out of. So the one I want to go into next is I'm going to go into the first stitch on this front knitting needle. I slide it off the knitting needle onto the tapestry needle. Going to go across this knitting needle. Just pull that tight. And now I pull the tapestry needle to the other side, or sorry, not pull the knitting needle to the other knitting needle point. Turn my work and keep on going through the rest of these stitches. Now all I'd have to do is weave in each one of these two ends, and then I'd have a finished cotton round. I hope you enjoyed this video today. If you have any comments or questions, please feel free to leave them down below. And if you're new to my channel, don't forget to hit that red subscribe button. That way you stay up to date on all my future videos.